more, while we wait for a few more people to join, go ahead and just drop in the chat where you're connecting from. We'll see where everybody is. I feel like we end up meeting everyone from everywhere, all over. All right. I am going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our webinar, where you get to ask us some questions that maybe you've wondered about and not maybe even known who to ask. I'll tell you a little bit about me. My name is Wendy. I'm a CPA. I've been in the accounting field, tax and accounting, for over 20 years, pretty much my whole adult life. I've prepared tax returns for individuals, businesses, trusts, people that live both in and outside the US. I've pretty much done any of the tax returns you might have to file. Who is TFX? We are a highly rated firm for both expats and US-based tax preparers. We have over 80 CPAs and EAs with over 20 years of experience. We have a lot of experienced people on our team here ready to help you. We have over 50,000 clients. We've helped people from all around the world. Like I said, whether you live in the US or outside of the US, we can help. So here's our agenda for today. Oh, before we get started, I'm going to ask this poll question. How did you find this webinar? Go ahead and take a few minutes. We'll answer that before we really get started. Definitely let us know if there's any subjects you'd like us to cover, and we'll try to put out a webinar on that. So far, I'm sure you find this webinar great. So it's going to be super informative. Give just a few more seconds on that, and then we will move forward with the webinar. And it does look like our chat might be disabled. We're working on that to be able so that you all can ask your questions. Something to know also, once this webinar is done, we will have a replay available. And we will also, I see now that maybe some people are able to be in the chat. We'll also answer those questions as we're going through this. So if there's something you need more clarification on, or if maybe you're not seeing your question, feel free to ask it in there. We will also send you a list of these questions and answers that happen during this webinar. So we will have that available for you after. Okay, for our agenda for this webinar, we're going to go over some of the frequently asked questions that were questions that were submitted the most to us, right? We're going to go over your filing requirements, the different filing statuses available, double taxation and how to hopefully avoid it, your business filings, and what are your obligations when you have a business. We'll go over the deadlines that you have for 2025 for last year for 2024 and how TFX can help you meet those deadlines. What are your filing requirements when you are a US citizen living abroad? or even a green card holder, right? They're very similar in their filing requirements. A lot of countries, when you live in that country, say the UK, you're living in the UK, so you file and pay taxes in the UK. If you leave the UK and move somewhere else, say Switzerland, as long as you don't have any UK income, you no longer need to file there, right? Well, the US is special. With the US, it doesn't matter where you live. If you're that person living in the UK, filing and paying your taxes, and you are a US citizen, you also need to file your US tax return. So really, there are some slight differences, but generally speaking, you have the same filing requirements, whether you live in the US or outside of the US. That may surprise a lot of you, right? The US is one of 2 countries, I believe, that do this. So a lot of people that come to us maybe left the US to go work abroad, or maybe you just found out this last Christmas that you're a US citizen and you had no idea. You've never ever been to the US. If that's the case, let's say you're 50 years old and now you have 30 years of tax returns that you have to file. I mean, I can't imagine trying to collect stuff from your 20s to file a tax return for that year. Luckily, the IRS provides the streamlined procedures to be able to help in these kinds of situations where you had no idea you should be filing. Under the streamlined procedure, you submit 3 years of tax returns. And if the IRS accepts this streamlined package, you file those 3 years, and now you can just continue filing every year as if you'd been filing all along. We do thousands of these. This is a great procedure to really help you come into compliance with your US tax returns. You'll see on some of these slides, there will be a QR code. This will provide more detail on the items we're discussing. So please check into that if you want more information on the streamlined procedures. What about filing status, right? When you live abroad, what's available to you? As mentioned, you have the same obligations and options as a lot of people that live in the US. If you're single, usually you file single. But when you're married, it can get confusing on whether you should file separately or jointly. If you and your spouse both are US citizens or green card holders, if you have the same US filing requirements, in most cases, it's better to file jointly. This is something we look at for you when we prepare your return, and then we bring it up to you and say, hey, it looks like you could save by filing jointly. Or in most cases, it's better to file jointly. I've only seen a few situations when you both have filing requirements that it's better to file married filing separately. But generally speaking, you have more credits and a higher standard deduction when you're filing jointly. What about if your spouse is not a US person, right? No US ties. What do you do then? A lot of our clients file separately in these cases, because then you're the only one responsible for reporting your income. You can make the election to file jointly with your non-US spouse, but this is a once in a lifetime election. So if you do this, you need to continue to file jointly with that spouse. There are some pros and cons to this, and it's definitely something you want to talk to your tax preparer about to make sure it's right for you. The times that we see it's good to file jointly with a non-US spouse is usually when they make little to no income, because then you still get all those same deductions, those higher deductions and tax credits, but your income stays relatively the same. If your non-US spouse has equal or maybe more income than you, it may not be beneficial to include them because you will have to report all of their income on that return with you. So it is something we really want to look at before you decide to do that. Maybe you're worried since, like our UK example, that you'll have to pay taxes both in the UK and the US. Luckily, there are ways that we can mitigate this. I'm going to use an example to explain how we can use foreign tax credits to help with on your US tax return. Let's say you work and live in Germany and you made 50,000, right? From your employer, your wage income is 50,000 and you paid Germany 10,000 of income tax. Well, of course, now you get to also report that 50,000 on your US tax return. And say the US tells you you owe 8,000 in US taxes. And you think that's not fair. Now I have to pay 18,000 on my 50,000 of income. Luckily, the foreign tax credit allows you to take that 10,000 that you paid to Germany and apply it or to use it to offset the 8,000 in the US. And you will have 2,000 left over. You don't get a refund for that 2,000 because you paid that to Germany, and that's what was due to Germany. The US didn't receive any of it. So there isn't a refund, but that 2,000 will stay on your tax return to be carried forward to future years. So if maybe in the future, you maybe move to a lower tax country like Singapore, that can help offset any of that future wage income you might have. So as you can see, there are ways to help offset the US taxes. Some of you may know about PFICs, passive foreign investment companies. This is something that catches a lot of people off guard. This is really any non-US mutual fund. This is ETFs, unit trusts, just those pooled, those many stocks into one investment. As soon as you have those, there's additional forms that need to be filed. And we can use that tax credit both on the form when we report it or with the foreign tax credit. There are lots of ways we can help to offset any US tax so that you don't get, the whole goal is not to be double taxed. What about your business filings and obligations, right? What do you do if you have a business outside of the US? Many of you know that when you are self-employed, you have to pay Social Security contributions. Well, the US has agreements with some countries that helps to determine who you pay Social Security taxes to, so that you won't have to pay them in both countries. We'll use an example. All of these agreements are different, but we'll use Italy as an example. Say you have a business in Italy. If you're operating through, let's say, a separate entity, maybe an LLC, a limited liability company, you wouldn't need to pay US Social Security taxes on that income, but you may have to pay GILTI tax on that income. Now, GILTI tax is a whole nother topic in itself. So if you want more information, definitely check out that QR code or ask your preparer for more information. But just know that operating in that separate entity, no US Social Security tax, but maybe GILTI tax. Now, if you operate as a sole proprietor, where it's just you, no separate business structure, then you may have to pay US Social Security tax. Now, as I mentioned, there are agreements. Our agreement that the US has with Italy is a little different in that if you are an Italian citizen, you will only need to pay into the Italian Social Security system. You will not need to pay into the US. However, if you are not an Italian citizen, but you are living and being self-employed in Italy, you will likely have to pay Social Security tax to both the US and Italy. So it's very important to talk to your preparer and find out who you need to pay, and if you have to pay Social Security tax to both countries, then we can see if there's options out there like a separate entity that may help you lessen your US tax obligations. When do you need to file all of these items? Let's go over some of the key dates. If you have a US-based business, these returns are due in March. Now that comes up pretty quick. So you definitely want to request an extension for that if you don't think you will be ready for your US-based business. As you can see, April 15th is a big deadline day for a number of reasons. This is when your first estimated tax payment is due. If you have to pay your taxes throughout the year, the first payment is due in April. This is also the deadline to amend your 2013 return for net investment income tax. A whole nother webinar we did last year on this. If you're not even sure what that means, reach out to us. We'll show you that webinar and you can see if this is something you might want to look at. Lastly, the deadline for US tax-based preparers, right? If you're in the US, your tax return is due April 15th. If you live outside the US, it's June 16th. So check out that link in the QR code, bookmark it. Has all of these deadlines. It has the links where you go to request an extension. It's a super handy link for this one. As I said, you definitely want to request an extension. There are late filing penalties, and these are usually the larger penalties out there. You want to make sure to request this extension. It takes, as you can see, it takes 1 minute. You just have to give us a few items of information and we can file that for you. And then you have at least until October to file that return. I know some countries, it takes a while to get the stuff you need to be able to file your US tax returns. One thing to note, your taxes, if you owe on your US tax return, are still due in April. This extension is only a deadline to file. So if you think you might owe US taxes, it's a good idea to make a payment in April. Just make sure to let us know when we prepare your return so we can report that on the return, and if you decide, refund any extra that you might have paid. Just reach out to us and we'll help you with all of this and make sure that you're avoiding any late penalties. We can help you with your US tax filing obligations no matter who you are. You could be a non-resident of the US, a non-US person, and your work sends you to the US for a few months. And now you may have to file a US tax return for that income. You may have to file a state tax return for that income. We will help you determine what needs to be filed, when it needs to be filed, and how to minimize any tax on that income. Again, we have over 80 CPAs and EAs with lots of experience, especially in expat taxes. We're a lot more aware of the different items that you may need to report once you live outside of the US. We review all of your information and ask questions in order to help make sure you get all the deductions and credits that you are allowed. We have a great website that gives you more information on all kinds of forms and a tax questionnaire that we have you fill out when we're preparing your tax return. This tax questionnaire paid really close attention to the questions. This is how we find out if you might have additional filing requirements that you didn't know you had. Maybe somebody gave you a cash gift. Maybe you inherited some money from your mom. We can help you to file whatever might be needed for that. And this also helps. There's fairly large penalties for forms that are purely informational for the IRS. We want to make sure you are filing everything you need to. Now, we really want you to be happy with our service just because we enjoy our jobs and want to do what we can for you. We would like you to refer us to your friends and pay you rather than just putting money out into the void, hoping somebody sees this, right? So we offer, if you refer a friend, your friend will get $25 towards their tax return preparation fee, and you will get $50. If you refer 3 friends, you also get a $150 referral bonus towards that tax preparation. So if you have enough friends, they might be able to help you pay for that US tax return. Just not a bad thing. All right, now I will look at some of the chat and see if there's some questions I can answer. Somebody asks, maybe they forgot to apply the foreign tax credit in the previous 2 years. Can they apply them in the current year and carry over any remaining to the next year? You will want to amend those prior to returns. If you miss the foreign tax credit, you will need to amend and include them on that, and then you can carry them forward. So we can't report everything. There's a few ways that we can do the foreign tax credit. Again, if you talk to us, we can know your exact situation. But generally speaking, you're going to need to amend to add those. So this person asks about a tax treaty for US citizens, for US and Europe. For example, Spain, for working residents, what's the procedure? Pay US tax and that amount will be credited by Spain, or pay Spanish tax and US will credit that amount and give a refund since Spain tax is higher. Well, it all depends. It's your favorite tax answer is it all depends. With the foreign tax credit, it really depends on who that money belongs to. If you are working in Spain, and that is considered Spain's income, so they have first right to tax it. You will be able to, you have to pay tax to Spain, but you can offset the US tax on that same income with that Spanish tax. If you have US interest income, say you have a bank account in the US, we would have to look at the treaty with Spain and see if there's a way that you can offset that and who that is US's income, but there are different options on how we can treat that for the foreign tax credit. As you dig deeper, it can get a little more complicated, but we would look at that for you and be able to Usually when there's a treaty, we can help offset, so you're only paying tax in one country. All right, let's see what else we have. So this person says they're both an Italian and US citizen, a contractor for a US company. Your income would fall under the tax treaty for Italy and the US. You definitely still need to file. It's like I said, as a US citizen, no matter where you live, you need to file a US tax return. Whether or not you pay tax is a whole different story, but you have to file that US tax return. Your employer, if they want to send you a 1099, that does sound appropriate. It sounds like if you're a freelance contractor, you're basically what I was talking about, is that sole proprietor. So they will issue, because you're a citizen, they have to issue that 1099 to you, which shows how much they paid you for 2024. Then you report that both in Italy and in the US. And because you're an Italian citizen, you would likely only need to pay Social Security tax to Italy. So somebody asked about if they can proceed with being paid a regular paycheck in their US bank account, if they're mostly going to be spending their time in Spain, or if they need to pay them differently. Really, it doesn't matter where the money is going, whether it's a US bank account or outside of the US bank account. It's where you are earning that money. If you're in Italy, like the previous person, you're living and working in Italy, that's likely going to be Italian income, whether or not it's deposited in a US bank account. I'll answer one more, then we'll finish up. Let's see. This person is a US citizen and married a Brazilian last year. They live in Brazil and are looking whether they should file married filing separately or head of household. Can they claim their stepchildren as dependents? Maybe. The dependent rules can be tricky. A lot of times you need to make sure that you can prove that you're paying for more than half of all of their support. And you generally want to have an ITIN for them if they're not a US citizen. But that's something we would look at with you. You would fill out their information in the questionnaire, and we leave a place for you to enter notes in that questionnaire. And that way you can let us know, hey, I'm interested in claiming these kids, which we'll know anyway, and then we can let you know if you might benefit and if it's possible to claim them. So, all right, well, I think that's all we have time for today. If you have any extra questions, please reach out to us at our website, taxesforexpats.com. We have a full support team. And then also, once you engage us to prepare your tax return, you're able to correspond with the person preparing your taxes so they can answer better questions at that time, because then they know your full situation. It's really hard to answer when we don't know your complete picture. But as for that, check us out at our website, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thanks for coming.